Absolutely. I think piano is the basic instrument that everybody should learn just because of the whole harmonies and the two hands. You get a complete picture, so it makes you a better musician when you can hear the entire score in front of you. I started piano later than violin. And some people think that you should start piano first. I don't think that makes that much of a difference, but if you learn piano, first of all, it's easier after you've learned one instrument. The second instrument becomes a lot easier. But piano is the basic instrument, and then as a violinist, I think it's also very good to learn the viola at some point. You get a different kind of a sound perspective and different kinds of colors, just anything to make hearing better, and listening to the entire score so that you become a good musician as well, and not just a good instrumentalist. Josef Gingold was a humanitarian. He said himself, he said, I'm not a teacher, I'm a psychologist. And indeed, he was a very perceptive man, and he was my inspiration. He had just such a warmth, and he became sort of like everybody's grandfather. Because of his entire demeanor. He was like a ray, just a sunshine. And he took care of everybody. When I went there, he had 40 students. And you can imagine 40 students, and he taught every day from 9 to 6. And on the weekends, he taught what he called his kindergarten. So the young students coming from various different parts of America flying in just to have lessons with him. We had lessons with him on Saturday, and we spent almost the entire day with him, where he would relay stories about his experiences throughout his life. And we got a really great picture about life in the Romantic age, at the end of the Romantic age, and stories about his inspirations, like Chrysler and his teacher Yesai, which were very, very useful in learning about the background of that time and the culture of that time. So he didn't really teach by so much telling you. He didn't talk a lot about technique, unless obviously his students were at a very high technical level already. But I think he had a variety of different students. He took students on the basis of also their attitude towards life, and if they were good people, good-hearted, and so on. And he thought that like Suzuki did, also a very important part of a human being. And so, he had a variety of students, and he didn't talk that much about technique unless there was a need for it. Under the principle that the more you think about technique, the more problems you actually have with it. And so sometimes he said, there are teachers who, really want to take you apart and then put you back together. He said, and tell you exactly this finger goes here and this thing. And he said, by the time, you do follow all the rules, you can't even move anymore. So he was against that sort of. He dealt more with, I think, the students' attitude towards life and understanding life. And that's a principle that I learned from him, and I shared with him, and I also had more in that direction. I like to relate all musical aspects towards like experiences in life and so on, and a little bit philosophical and so on. Yes, I have to mention my parents. My father, very liberal, and he grew up both my parents are very liberal outlook, very open-minded to other cultures. My father grew up was born in Shandong province, and during that time he heard because Shandong was under the German sphere of influence. So he heard the German language, and that's why you have Qingdao beer, which is which the Chinese learned from the Germans. And so they made the Qingdao beer, and he heard the German language, he heard the Japanese language, and I think that's what made him very interested in different cultures and also politics, because of how different nations get along with each other, their interrelationships, and so on. He later became. He studied political science. He taught political science and history and so on. He was very interested in background and so on of different cultures. So, anyways, he learned Japanese when he was young. Tried to learn Japanese, and later on, then he went to Taiwan. And so he grew up and studied in Taiwan. So he had a mixture of different kinds of attitudes of divinity. And he met my mother in Taiwan, who also grew up in Taiwan. My mother actually lived 1 year in Korea also. She spoke Korean when she was 5 years old. So they had a rather adventurous and kind of life. And then they went to Canada, where we were born, myself and my sisters. And so that kind of influenced and inspired our outlook about the world. And in Canada, of course, one of the great things is that you have this kind of Trudeau, who is very multiculti and so on. And so that fit in. My father loved Trudeau, and so it fit in really well with his outlook. That's one influence. And then I had another Hungarian. Well, there were many people that I listened to, of course, lots of influences, but I liked him, Gingold, who was like, he was like a gypsy. Isabel Faust also worked with him, and he was a great musician, but he was a free spirit, so he was a little bit like gypsy background. And he used to, when we first went with him to Europe in '86, he actually planned concerts where he wouldn't tell you if you were playing until the last minute. And basically an hour or 2 hours before the concert, he'd say, "You're going to play this tonight." And basically he threw his students into the pit like that and made you just go up on stage and play. And he made this experience so fun. It was such a fun experience. He made us learn how to dance. So we all danced, and we went to Schloss Elmau, and we were all dancing. We learned how to dance the Ländler and so on, to have a kind of a sensual feel of your body and so on, I think. And that helped also. And that kind of freedom from your own ego. And so by the end of the course, no one was nervous about going up on stage, because you thought of this as something fun to do. And he was a very generous person, so after we performed, he was really happy if it went well. So he would invite everybody for Salzburger Knockerl or ice cream or whatever. And so it was a great experience. He really knew how to throw a party. So he was very inspirational. But there are many people that inspired me, but those were two that really come to mind right now.
Wow.
And my piano teacher, Lee Kum Sin, who's here with us right now. I had a little bit of a not so positive experience in violin at that time, so I didn't practice so much. And Mr. Lee was really nurturing and very supportive. So I actually practiced much more piano when I was younger than violin, because he really inspired me at that time with music. My parents are both educators, and they both taught, so I already had that background. I think I got most of it, although now both of my sisters are teaching, one in the United States and one in Salzburg. So the background was there even from my parents. But I started young. I even when I was 10, I was really interested in teaching, and I used to sometimes offer advice to my sisters and so on. I think it's in the background. Maybe it's in the genes, I don't know. But the idea, for me, I think, even early, I think education is really important, and I think it's the backbone of society, and so and that's something that my parents also believe. So I I I I, I care a lot about education as the basis of everything. So that's why I'm working also on a kind of an educational project that's global. And I feel that music is kind of the best way to educate young young children, because you learn so much from the great masters and so on. Things about life, about humanity and so on. And that's, it brings out the creativity in young children. They have it in abundance because, when you're young, you see the world, and it's just so much color and so alive that children think that it's a magic playground in a little bit. I think all of us have had that experience or that kind of feeling at a young age when you believe that life is magic, and when you keep some of that, I think you can accomplish really great things. Those are the people who invent things. I'm sure the person, Wright brothers or Da Vinci, who wanted to sketch an airplane or something, didn't do it because they wanted to do an exercise in aerodynamic and things, but they did it just because they probably saw a bird flying or something. And you look at a bird and you thought, well, if they can fly, why don't we put people up there in the sky as well? And you think that you can't do the impossible, but children believe that they can do the impossible, and that's why they believe in things like Santa Claus and fairy tales and becoming a princess and kissing a frog and all that kind of stuff. I think that a little bit of that kind of belief in the impossible is a really good thing. To foster the innate, God-given human spirit and every creativity in every child. I think that's really, really important for children, because every child has enormous potential. I think after having worked with quite a number of younger kids now, children are a lot smarter in a sense. They're so honest and so pure, and they have such a positive energy. And to keep that and to make them keep some of that, even though you have to go through the rough side of life. Everybody has to get through life and all the challenges that come with it, but to maintain that kind of positive spirit and then integrity and a sense of humor, like my teacher Gingold used to say. And that's very, very good to have, I think. Collaborations. Oh, that's very, very important. I think playing in quartets. I haven't ever played in quartets, but I think the idea of playing together and as a way to develop the ears, and that's hearing each other, really listening. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to, when you work with other people, also you get to understand other people better, and you then understand yourself better. And so, when you live with somebody, it's like playing a quartet, it's like a marriage a little bit. You're living with three other people, and there's challenges. It's like in every marriage, you say it's for better or for worse. And sometimes there are moments that you really think you want to have a divorce, but you have to get through the challenge, and you have to learn how to get over every challenge. And that is something that is a great learning experience. Not just the musical, how to get together, but also personally and so on. Like I said, I mean, we are recreative artists. We don't create. I mean, some of us do. It would be great if everybody did. But as recreative artists, we are more learning to be a psychologist, because we have to understand every composer, and we're like a little bit like actors and actresses. We have to take a role or take a piece of music and understand the composer's intentions. So you have to know the background, the history, and so on. And that means that you have to learn how to be a good psychologist, and that you learn also from these long-term collaborations. Musically, of course, is listening, just training the ears and hearing all the different voices and the different colors and nuances. Well, with different people, you approach it a little bit differently. With children, it's easy because they have it still. And they haven't lost it through the whatever. They haven't acquired cynicism at any time. So they really have that energy, that positive energy. And so it's quite easy. I mean, I use a lot of storytelling. I try to invoke all sorts of fantasy in their way that they approach music, so that they let their imagination run. And that's very important. But also to always think of everything as not being impossible. It's always something that there's always a solution, and probably an easy solution. And if you always think of that there's always solution and an easy solution for everything, you keep that sort of feeling that I can do everything. And it's not impossible. Everything has a music. Actually, playing the violin is something that I always tell my students also. If you can manipulate a cell phone so easily, I mean, my little niece took an iPad and did all sorts of things with my iPad at 2-3 years old that I never knew was there, and I never knew she even learned how to. And if you can figure that out intuitively, then why can't you figure out how to play a violin intuitively? I mean, if everybody in the world had to play a violin, it was like as necessary as drinking water, I think that nobody would actually have such a hang-up about it. Because everybody thinks you have to have an iPhone. And if you think you have to have an iPhone, then you learn it. That's it. You learn it and you don't think it's difficult, because you think everybody has to do it. And so if we put that, I mean, it is motoric. It's just motoric. And if you do anything that's motoric, you're not supposed to, think about it. You're supposed to just do it with sense. Everybody has this kind of sense of space. And that's how you learn how to parallel park. You can't see the space. You can't see what you're doing. But somehow you can get into the space. So it's that sense of space. And Mozart, when he was young, he played with blindfolded. Again, it's because he has this great sense of space. And conductors have to have it. Dancers have to have it. Anything motoric, sports people have to have it. And if you develop that sense of space also, then the technical part of it becomes easy. So then also you become free. And if you become free again, it's much easier to keep that kind of positive attitude about everything. With older, more advanced students, I do still, with each one it's a little bit different, because everybody at that age, they have different experience in their life. So then you have to, like my teacher, you have to be a little bit of a psychologist and kind of know what's the best way, or trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with each one individually to inspire that kind of return or to bring out that kind of sense of creativity and fantasy and so on. one thing I think the most important was on the educational basis. I wanted every student to take on different roles. And so we don't have conductors, except for new music, where it's impossible to do without conductors. But basically, the idea that they have three different roles. One, soloist, and so they always exchange roles all the time. Soloist, leader, and I always say not accompaniment, but support roles. Support roles. I hate the word, accompaniment. I really don't. Even in pieces where it is, where the piano part is pretty sparse, Paganini or whatever, now that, I think it's still important, because if you can't hear the harmony behind it, it's sort of like looking at a painting, and you want to paint a portrait, but the only thing on the canvas is a portrait and there's nothing around it. It's really hard to understand why the person has the expression on his face that he does. I mean, if somebody on a portrait looks a little bit troubled or has some difficulty or looks like that, then we don't know why. But if you have the whole costume behind it, either he's wearing a soldier's uniform or something, or he's got a rifle or something, then we have an idea what kind of period he could have become if he had just come back from war, all of that experience. Is that why? And you have a better idea of which country they come from, what is the background, what makes him have that expression on his face. And that's sort of like the harmony of the music. And so even in a simple piece where you have this accompaniment, I believe that it's never accompaniment, it's a support role. So that's why listening in a chamber ensemble, it's really important to hear all the different voices and the importance of every single voice, to make that complete picture, to have a deeper understanding of what's going on in the music. Again, it comes back to education. Mm-hmm. And I feel, classical music has its roots in Europe, and mostly Central Europe, but you see a lot of great composers coming in the Romantic period, particularly out of Russia. And you have some very good Polish composers, you have some Scandinavian composers, and each one, and then you have fantastic Hungarian composers, Bartók, and nowadays Kurtág, great musicians. And I think every composer from every country has a little bit, they kind of represent the historical background of their time and their own culture. And in order for young musicians from other countries, where it's not your own culture, to really understand the culture of where classical music comes from, the roots of it, and going back to roots, that I think it's really important for musicians from particularly like Asian countries, where they don't have the same idea. In China, they don't have the same idea of religion that in Central Europe. You don't have that Christianity and all of that kind of things. And so it's really important for young musicians from different countries, have different backgrounds, to come back to the roots of classical music, to learn the culture of where music came from. And that's Central Europe, whether it's Germany, for Italy it's violin, because that's where violin was born. And even to learn from the language, you get a little bit of a feeling of why that music is what it is. Because you have Italian culture, the language, it's a little bit more staccato, and sometimes it's a lively and so on, clean and so on. And that also makes you understand some of the Baroque music of that time. If you look at German language, it's a language that kind of makes you very patient, and because you have to wait until the very end to know, what somebody's trying to say. So, and you understand then that patience is very important, and structure. That's very dramatic, and I think some kids like to rush things and always chase things, and sometimes for Bach you need that kind of peace, inner peace, and you learn that through the language. You learn that through going into a church and a cathedral, and the idea that you have faith, and you have complete faith in God or something, that gives you that inner peace, and you have to understand that relationship. So that's why I thought of maybe establishing festivals in places where it's important, because those are the roots of classical music, so that young people can come and take in the culture and just learn from each other. Music connects, so it's a great place to have everybody connect in many more ways than one. Good questions. There are a lot of things. I think, everybody has to have passion, dedication, a belief in the impossible. Again, we come back to that magic thing, fantasy, and so on. That gives you colors. You have to have lots of colors, because that's what life is about. If you look at anything that's alive, you look at a Guarneri or Stradivari. If you look at a wood, I mean, it's not just one color. It's just so many nuances on it. If you look at a tree, it's not just one green. It's many shades of green and other colors as well. Anything that's coming, our own skin, it's got nuances. And so you don't want to play music one color like Kunststoff, like plastic. You want to make it come alive. And so that's really important, to look around, I suppose, at nature, and also take it in, register what's going out on it, and try to replicate that also in music. Because I think all the answers are all there around us, and and if you seek it, you'll find it, in a sense. Maybe that sounds very religious, but I think it's the truth. I mean, if you look around and you kind of don't register it, it's like some people look, but they don't actually see. And some people listen, but you don't hear. Then it's a problem. And so you want to make sure that everything you do, you actually register it and take it in and notice it. So those kind of things are really important. Then you need, then it takes a lot of hard work. So practice. But like I say, which way to Carnegie Hall? Practice. I think practicing dedication, kind of single-minded dedication, devotion, sacrifice. I think a lot of people nowadays, because of the world in which we live in, where materialistically everything is very easy, that we tend to get a little bit too comfortable and expect everything to be comfortable. And we have to remember that spiritually we need to kind of challenge ourselves spiritually, because we live in a world right now which is rather geared towards data. In other words, only facts. And that's not really the idea of humanity, because humanity, you have to have, your brain is fantastic, but actually it's your senses and your heart and your spirit that makes us human beings. And we have to have faith in that complete, and not just focus too much on, everything has to be thought out, or because that kind of makes you limited, I think.
So you mentioned how in our day now, everything tends to be a little bit too comfortable for young musicians. And I think in that sense, it makes it hard for them to deal with setbacks. So how would you advise younger musicians on dealing with situations where things don't work out as planned for them?
Life, one has to remember that one's life is not always in your own control. Everyone has a different fate, and this fate is not something that you can seriously control in a way. You are predestined as a person to do certain things. You are given certain talents, and you're given a certain personality. And what's the problem is nowadays is that we have too many choices, and it makes us confused. And we have to really understand that you don't have to do everything that everybody else does. You have to focus on listening to your own inner voice and know what it is and know where your talents lie. It's a courage to be yourself. It's a courage to be yourself, because you have so many choices. In the olden days, there were very few people, very little materialistic comforts. And now, we say we have to have water, we have to have a break, we have to, even I do it sometimes, driving very short distances and so on. And you don't want to do anything, and everything's really hot. I mean, it is hotter than it used to be anyway, so it is more difficult. But when you think about 100 years ago or something, when there was no electricity and no heating or something like that, people still got through things and so on. In those kind of days when you don't have that kind of TVs and all this kind of stuff, it was hard to know where you would find the best quality education. And it was, since it's materialistically difficult, you really had to make a choice. You had to look inside yourself and say, okay, I really want to do this, because if you choose that thing, you're going to have to make sacrifices. If you decide to, be a pianist, then you've got to try to find the best teacher. And there's not that many of them, and maybe they live really far away. So if you really decide to be a pianist, it's a single-minded thing where you might have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes and take some carriage somewhere in really bad stormy weather, because you have a lesson on that day with your master. And you have to drive there in an uncomfortable situation for 6-7 hours. And so that's why at that time, when you get to the lesson, your master has a lot of empathy, because they know that you've gone through that much hardship. So they invite you and make you comfortable, tell you stories, give you a cup of tea, and so on. And then they spend really quality time with you, because you made the sacrifice. And so they give you this time to spend with you, to really talk about life and talk about philosophy and talk about things. And so you get a really quality education. You really know what you're there for. And then, because you've done that sacrifice, they might give you a meal and something to eat, and then you spend the whole rest of the day traveling back to your home. So you're taking more than a day just to have a lesson. But that lesson really meant something, and you made that choice. So you sacrifice yourself for that. Nowadays, there's so many different choices that I think a lot of young people kind of get confused, and they think, oh, what should I do? What should I do? Should I do this? And if that doesn't work, I'll try a little bit of that. And if that doesn't work, I'll try a little bit of this. And so it makes everybody a little bit confused, and kind of, because we're now geared towards materialistic gain a little bit as a sign of success, it makes us a little, it's a little bit stressful. And it takes a lot of courage to look within yourself instead and see what is it that I can contribute and sacrifice myself in order to contribute towards humanity or whatever you think it is. Oh, do I have to choose one?
Well, you can say a lot. The more, the better.
Okay. I hated to practice. My sisters practice a lot, but you know the whole thing about practice. So I would have told myself to practice more. So I always tell my students, don't do what I do. You've got to practice more when you're young, and you've got physical strength to do it. Let's see what else. And later on, when you got a little older, learned to delegate. I wish I'd known some of the things that I do now earlier. Prioritize. I was kind of interested in everything a little bit too much, you know, sort of keep focus, you know, that kind of thing. I probably would have told myself earlier. I mean, now, having lived through a lot more now. Everything I think has a pro and a con. Everything. There's no absolute good thing and absolute bad thing. I think every good thing becomes bad if it's too much. So, I mean, you take a look at, things that are healthy. If you eat one thing that you think is healthy, it becomes toxic after a while. So everything is balance. And you have to learn how to balance and know when is the limit and not indulge in that one thing. So everything, even when it's a bad thing, is a good thing. And maybe that's a religious idea. In Bach's time, he knew that very well. So if you take that outlook, I think, you become less likely to complain about things, because you know that things that are bad, that you think of as negative, is a learning experience that makes you more mature. If you can get over it and stay positive, then actually that's something that, builds your inner strength and your experience and the level of experience and makes you a more mature person. And you learn from hardship to find empathy for other people and other people's struggles. And that's really important. And in music, we're always dealing with fantastic music that has a lot of those kind of messages inside the music, a philosophical message. I think so. So coming back to your question directly, I think, yes, being interested in everything, maybe that was just my own instinctive need to want to kind of understand everything in order to come back to a focus. I think, some people are very dedicated right from the very beginning. I admire that, and I really, sometimes I envy that kind of single-minded focusedness. But also there is some things where you have to kind of look outside everything and have a little bit of, again, it's balance. You have to have interest in everything, because there's an interrelationship in everything in life. And so the more you learn, the more you learn about yourself and that which you want to focus eventually. And so everything helps. It's like music. Yes, you have melody, but without the harmony beside it and everything that supports it, then you don't have a deeper understanding of that melody. So yes, I think everybody needs to focus and yet go out and look at life, experience culture. And when you're in Italy, go out and see all the different arts and museums and learn the culture, try to learn a little bit language. That's why we have sometimes Italian language class, and in Germany we offer the German language class. And try to understand during all this why you're learning it, including music theory. Why do we learn music theory? How does it make us hear better the harmonies and so on? And so, yes, a little balance. You learn everything, but you also have to have priority and focus. Oh, I think we need classical music more than ever. And especially for young kids, I see young kids from the early age on posting really everything on Facebook and so something. And I think because modern life is very stressful, and this is no negative criticism at all, this is just what it is. I have a lot of empathy for the stress that parents going on to and the pressures that we have because of this modern society. Parents are all trying to, make ends meet, and so sometimes they work, both parents work, and so children are sometimes, I think, not given enough, maybe. This is also very different in different cultures because every culture has a different emphasis on the parental role in a child's life. So this is not a general thing. It's just that there are times where right now, it's like one of my students said, he said, sometimes there are parents now that treat their kids a little bit like a plant, and they put them on the windowsill and they remember to water it once in a while, which unfortunately, and I understand it's stress and so on, but being a parent and the role of the mother in the education of the kids at an early age and so on, and the father is forming the roots of a child to provide, love and attention, and this is part of the education again, and it is really, 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 really important, and education also needs a serious revamping, I think, because we need to rethink education of children. And in this way, classical music is the best because music promotes creativity. And what I mean is that music is the only art that travels through an intangible sound. We can't see sound. We can't touch it. You can't, it's not something that you can touch. And that's why it's limitless. If you have paint, and you have a painter or a writer, you have certain words, and then they can only mean what the word says. I mean, and also painting, red is red. If you draw a horse, it's a horse. It's the limit. And so you have very few painters who reach the level where with a painting they can give a spiritual message beyond. And you can I mean, Monet paintings and all that stuff. If you look at the painting, it does something to you spiritually. It touches you somewhere in your soul or something, and that's why they're so valuable. But music can portray everything, and that's why it has to do directly with your spirit, because the spirit is something that we can't touch. We can't put anything tangible to it. And so music, therefore, is the best way to bring out the most valuable thing in humanity, and that's our spirit. And all that which belongs to the spirit, which means dedication, passion, devotion, love, sadness, joy, and sense of humor. These are things that we can't see, but they're the most valuable things for everybody. And if you take a look at even the great sports people, if you're going to be I always tell my students, if you're going to be a race car driver, you do it because you believe you can get there faster than anybody else. If you don't have that kind of belief that you can fly with your car, you're not going to get there. So it's a faith in your own spirit. And that's very valuable. And if we can keep some of that and allow the young kids with classical music, because that's where there's no limit, then I think it would be much better. Many times, I think. Many times. I think I love seeing when someone has that joy after they did something that they feel proud of. And they come off stage and they really know, and the audience knows it too. And you see that kind of, it's just being moved, really, really moved by something. That's something, again, it's the spirit. It's like Beethoven, the Ninth Symphony, the triumph of the human spirit, and you see that. And that's a great moment of joy, and it's wonderful to see, because if you have a generous spirit, you're more likely to be generous to other people too, I think. And that's really important.